Hello and welcome to day 3 of the Silly Socks Challenge, and we are ready to sew. First things first, when you're foundation paper piecing, your stitch length needs to be shorter. So dial that down to at least a 1.5. I usually go down to a 1.3, but 1.5 seems to be a little bit more comfortable for most people. The reason we do this is because you will be sewing through paper as well as fabric. And if this stitch length is lower, it is so much easier to tear that paper out at the end. So that's why the stitch length is lower when we foundation paper piece. Okay, so the next thing to check as well is I use a 1/4 inch foot. I find it a little bit easier, but at least make sure it's an open toe foot because then you can see where you're stitching onto the paper. Just makes it a little bit easier. All right, let's get ready to sew. We're all set up the machine, ready to go. I have my template, I have my fabric stacked in order, my stitch length is dialed down. The other tool I really like to use is a finger presser, and you use that to smooth your seams in between piecing. It just saves you a trip to the iron each time. All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to make an A section and a B section. You'll find C and D are exactly the same. So I'm not going to show you both of those because you'll get the hang of it from this one. All right, we start with A1. I'm going to feature this little cute gummy bear in the center. So I just need to line it up and make sure that my gummy bear is going to fit and that I have a 1/4 inch around all of the seam lines. That's super important, because that's your seam allowance and you don't want that shorter than a 1/4 inch. Otherwise it gets very tricky when you join things together. Now, you can add a dab of glue here to hold your fabric in place. You can pin it or you can go wild and just hold it in place and hope for the best. Whatever makes you happy. All right, that's A1. Our next section is A2, which will be the band of the sock, and I'm using the blue for that. So when we come to this section, just make sure your pin is out of the way of where you're going to be stitching. You can place this down and fold to create a line, because you're going to be sewing on that line between A1 and A2. So you can fold it so you can see it for where you're going to place your fabric. So you need to place your fabric over that with a 1/4 inch. Again, I know you'll hear me saying it a lot, that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then flip the pieces over, pop them under your machine. Now, controversial, I like to backstitch. A lot of other people don't in foundation paper piece, but I like to secure my stitches with a bit of backstitching. Just a couple of stitches at the beginning and at the end of that section. We're sewing on that line between A1 and A2. So we have stitched through it like that, across that line between A1 and A2. And yes, there was a little bit of a disruption in the video there because I stitched and my thread didn't work. One woman show here, so please forgive the video. I am doing my best. Right, so now we have stitched our line. We have a 1/4 inch. Now you could go to your cutting board with the rotary cutter and use an outer quarter ruler and trim this all neat and tidy, or you can go the lazy girl's guide to foundation paper piece and cut it by eyeballing a 1/4 inch and cut it right there at your sewing machine, which is what I do. But again, personal preference. If you would much rather have it neat and tidy and use the outer quarter ruler, please feel free. This is the way it works for me. Okay, so I have my 1/4 inch there. You flick your fabric back up, and this is where we use our handy little finger presser, and you just press it across that seam and it just flattens it in place. It just saves you a trip to the ironing board. Again, if you have a mini iron and a pressing mat right by your sewing station, go ahead and press that with an iron if you want to. Otherwise, I find the finger presser does a fantastic job, and then I give it a really good press with a hot dry iron once all my sections are pieced. Okay, so that's A1 and A2. A3 is our next one, this one here. So there's our line. Again, if you need to, just fold your template and fabric, give it a good press with your nails just to give you that line to stitch. Place your fabric over that line, remembering it's opening out to cover the section. So just make sure that you have enough and you've allowed yourself the full 1/4 inch seam allowance. and then we stitch it again. Once again, I back stitch, personal preference. You do what works for you. So I back stitch at the beginning of the end within the section that I'm piecing, not in the seam allowance. Because if you go too far into the seam allowance, it can be really tricky when you're pulling the paper out. Okay, again, I'm eyeballing and trimming. It's not perfect, but that's okay. It is really awkward to sew when you have a camera in front of you, so I trust you forgive any errors. All right, A4, we're just doing the same again. Make sure that's placed over with your 1/4 inch seam allowance. Stitch into place. Okay. And we're just trimming that. Remember, fold the paper back. I forgot to mention that. Fold the paper back when you're trimming. You don't want to actually trim through the paper. We're just trimming the threads and the fabric at this point. Okay, smooth that out with the finger presser, and we've nearly got the top half of our sock done already. We just need to put A5 in, which goes across the top like that. Now you can pin these to hold them in place or use a wonder clip. I hold it quite firmly and slide it under the presser foot, and it works okay for me. Again, and you'll hear me say this a lot, personal preference. Whatever makes foundation paper piecing work for you. Okay, so I'm just going to trim that again. Get rid of those scrappy bits. Open it out, press it into position. All right, and there's the top half of our block. Now do trim these threads while you're going. So much easier if you trim it now than at the very end of the whole block and you've got threads everywhere and they're getting tangled, and it's just not worth the hassle. Trim it there, and that is the top half of the sock done. Now, sorry, technical difficulties, the light went out, so I'm doing my best. Now I just want to talk about our second piece of the sock for the B section, for the foot of the sock. I wanted to show you this one because to get the fussy cut into the third section is a little trickier. In the first section, you're putting it down as the first piece, so it's nice and easy. You can position it easily. In this one, you've already pieced section B1 and B2, and you're putting it in as the third piece. You can still absolutely fussy cut. It's just a little trickier. So B1, B2 done. We're going to fold that template down to create a line. You can see on the template, hopefully you can see the lines through there. You're going to place your fabric the right way up. Now this is just for placement. Do not sew anything just yet. This is just to make sure that our little fussy cut is going to be centered in the middle of the sock of where we want it to go. So just kind of flick your fabric back and forth so you can see the lines on the template. Make sure you've got a 1/4 inch around all sides. Kind of line it up as best as you can. This is where a light box can be very handy too, so you can make sure. It's trickier trying to do it on camera, so please forgive me. So I'm going to move that over just a little bit. Now my bear may not be perfectly centered, but as long as I have fabric on all edges, I'm happy with that. Now put it back down where you folded that template before on that line between B1, B2 and B3. Fold it again, but press it really firmly to get a crease across all of your fabrics. See that crease is going across? Hold that, don't let that fabric shift, because this is where we do the bit of magic. You are going to place your nail on the edge of where that fabric is. Okay, so see that's where the crease is, the edge of the fabric there. You are going to flip the fabric upside down and line up that crease with the crease on the bottom where your thumbnail was. Now make sure that crease is in the right place all the way across, and then holding very carefully, don't let it slip, place it down and sew over that line once again. All right. So it's on a bit of a jaunty angle, you can see where I've stitched, but when I fold it down, my bear is going to be in that section. You can see there's the line there. My bear will be fussy cut sitting in the section there. So then just trim, make sure once you know it's going to fit correctly and you don't have to unpick and replace, then you can trim it back and continue piecing as per usual. Now, if you want to try this trick, which I also use with angles as well as with fussy cutting like this, and you're not 100% sure on your placement, when you stitch this, dial your stitch length all the way up to like a basting stitch, to like a 5.0, and stitch it. Flip your fabric back, make sure it's in place. If it's not in place, that 5.0 stitch will be so much easier to unpick than this little tiny one. If it is in place, go back and re-stitch that line with a smaller stitch length. So that's just another option. That's a little tip and trick that I use when I'm trying to work with either with angles or to make sure the fussy cut is in the correct place when it's not the first piece that I'm placing down. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish piecing the rest of it. Then we'll chat about trimming and joining our sections, and we'll nearly have one of our first silly socks complete. Okay, chat soon. Here's how our pieced sections looked now. So here's A and B. C and D are going to be pretty much exactly the same, so you can go ahead and do that. I'm just going to show you how we joined this one together. Now I have trimmed mine. So once you've pieced all your sections, take it over to your cutting mat and use a rotary cutter and trim the fabric and the paper on the dashed line on all the sides. Do not trim it to this solid line because otherwise you'll lose your seam allowance. Remember that magic seam allowance that I keep harping on about? Don't lose it now. We've done so well, let's not lose it now. Make sure you're cutting on those dashed lines on the outside. Then we're going to join section A to section B. Now when it joins, we want our seams to line up on the edge of the sock. So it just takes a little bit of fiddling, but it is quite doable. So line your edges up, and then what I do, it's a little tricky to show, but I flick it back on that 1/4 inch line and just check. Usually it's easier if you put it down, I'm not sure if you can see. Fold it back and that's not going to line up. So I know that I need to shift my sock piece at the top across. Put your fingernails on the seams if you can and fold it back to see if it's going to line up correctly. Again, this is really tricky with the camera in front of me, so please bear with me. But line it up like that and you can make sure it should piece together nice and tidily. So then hold it in place or pin if you can without shifting anything. Join it together again, back stitch at the beginning and the end, just so that your block is quite secure. Once you've joined your sections together, open them out, check that it's lined up. Mine's not 100% perfect, but I'm happy enough with it. Now I already did it before I forgot to video. Just remove the paper, these skinny little strips that go in the seam allowance. Just pull the paper out there. It just means your block will lay so much more flat. Then give it a press with a hot dry iron. And then you need to make C and D, and then you'll be joining them together. Here's one from before, and it's just a straight seam down the middle. So that's super easy to join that section together. And then you can go forth and make a whole bunch of silly socks. I hope you've had fun and I really appreciate you joining me for the challenge. Can't wait to see all your silly socks. Happy sewing!